Tell me when those are set.
It's a go.
Okay, then I'm going to share my screen. And we're seeing the correct screen, I do hope. And good
Yes.
afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for Preparing Students for Inclusive Post-Secondary Education. My name is Drew Andrews, and I'm the Assistant Director and Technical Assistance Coordinator with the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities at UCF. And joining me today
is Janice Seabrooks Blackmore. I am the Executive Director of the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. We are so happy to be here and thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and Drew will share the agenda for today.
So today's agenda, we're going to first start by talking a little bit about the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act. Then we're going to talk about preparing for inclusive higher education. We're going to share information on our college and career transition clubs. We're going to share information about the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities and some of the resources and products that we have available. And then we're going to talk about making the right choice.
So we'll get started with talking about the legislation. And the full name of the act is the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act and the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. But we always refer to it as the Act or the FPCTP Act or the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act. And so I know many of our colleagues who are joining us right now are used to a lot of acronyms. So we're at home here, but so we may call it the FPCTP Act or the Act. And we are delighted to be celebrating our 5th year anniversary. We've had a lot of success in these last 5 years. And as you can see, in January, the Act was in place. And in July of 2016, that's when the center actually started along with the effectiveness of the law. So we're excited to share with you a little bit about components within the Act. And so we're pulling out some of the key things that the Act addressed. One, it established the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities to be housed at the University of Central Florida. In addition to that, it established what a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program looks like and the requirements for that. Additionally, it funds scholarships for students who participate in any one of the FPCTP around the state of Florida, as well as it funds grants for those institutions who have approved programs to help with the implementation of those programs. So we have the Act and we have what has been defined, and we'll look at a little in a minute. What has been defined is what is an FPCTP, the processes of how to become one, right through the support in making sure that implementation is able to be carried out in the way that our colleagues have designed.
So we're talking with you all today because most of you work within or with the K-12 system, and you create the demand and supply the students to Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs because students must have exited the K-12 system to enroll in a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. So preparing students to access and succeed in post-secondary education, that's one of the things that you're doing, helping prepare students to move on to our programs. You're also developing meaningful summary of performance for students, which is that critical information that students have whenever they move on to post-secondary education that says, here are the students' interests and strengths. Here are the accommodations that have worked well and helped this student be successful at K-12. That summary of performance is very, very important whenever students move on to post-secondary education. And it's important that students know to share that summary of performance. Create and provide choices for post-secondary education is one of the things that we're trying to do. And we're also, for those of you who have a career technical college within your district, you have an opportunity to create a Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition program on that post-secondary campus, because we want students to have lots of choices. And so we're going to start by sharing information on how to implement a college and career transition club. So we were thinking, how do we help families, students, professionals know more about Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs? Because we kept coming across people after we had been sharing information where we thought, was a very wide swipe of sharing information, that still had not heard of Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. So to increase awareness of those FPCTPs and opportunities, and help students with intellectual disabilities prepare for and access those opportunities across Florida, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities is partnering with educators, partnering with you to help share the information and have students better prepared. We are partnering to develop and implement Florida college and career transition clubs at local schools serving high school students. Clubs will be inclusive. So again, we do not want this to be a club for just students with disabilities or just students with intellectual disabilities. We want it to be a club that has all students. That's an inclusive club. Students with intellectual disabilities, students with other disabilities, and students without disabilities. Because for those of us who have worked in the area of transition, it doesn't take long to realize that transition is really a service that all students need to move smoothly to the next step in their educational process.
And we've actually had, okay. So, excuse me. We've actually had a number of high schools across the state of Florida, 80 actually, that have taken the challenge of and the opportunity to develop actual programs across the state. And so we are excited about that. And in doing that, they had to look at different student learning outcomes that we identified and that we expect for them to address, related to 7 competencies or outcomes that we have. And with those, we call those student learning outcomes. And as each program applied, and those that are currently in progress, those that applied, they looked at those 7 learning outcomes and they determined to create their program activities around those 7 learning outcomes, because at the end of each year, we ask them to report on their strategies and activities, the progress, how that their students do, and the unique opportunities that are moving them towards achieving those student learning outcomes. So they kept those in mind as they designed them. We'll go over what those are. And keeping in mind, as Drew said, they have to be inclusive and they need to be appropriate per grade level. So those programs must identify students with intellectual disabilities and all other disabilities, as well as those without. So the first outcome, students will identify 3 careers or career fields in which they are interested and the competencies needed to pursue those careers. When we think about all of our learning outcomes, they are based on research and evidence-based promising practices, that really transition practices that look at successful results to post-school outcomes. And so we shaped and packaged the outcomes thinking about that, identifying careers. We hope as students participate in the programs that will be a major goal during each year, and actually 2 years, because each one of the high schools that are participating are committed. We're committed to them in providing additional resources for 2 years. We also want them to not only identify 3 careers that they might be interested in, but what's the pathway to get to the career through high school and through post-secondary education and training, or whatever experiences they need. How will they get there? They have to think about that as well. Go ahead, Drew. The third learning outcome is students will identify post-secondary institutions. I think you're probably noticing that the learning outcomes are actually no different from any students, and it shouldn't be. And we look at the pattern of how do we make decisions about what we want to do as adults and what's the pathway to get us to that. And in this case, we're looking at post-secondary. So we often, many of you probably identified a post-secondary institution for various reasons. But as you thought about what you wanted to do, you aligned your interest with institutions that offered those programs. And so we have those students do that as well. Not only that, to make sure students are self-determined in the way that they look at post-secondary education, we want them to think about and look at those institutions to think about what supports are there. How are they able to get the supports they need, which they've been used to in high school, to be productive, to be successful and meet their career goal in the post-secondary education setting? Okay, go on. When we look at student learning outcome number 5, so as they think about identifying a post-secondary program, they're looking at how does that fit with things they think about related to work. What is they think about their career and solidify their options as they think about that. What's the work environment they may be used to, or what's out there? How much money? I know many of you are working with students to go to identify different resources, finding out what's the salaries, what's the career options in their place, or what's the career options wherever they want to live or work, or wherever they want to dream, wherever they dream to live and work. And so they too focus on that within the CCT clubs, as we say, an acronym. And so just like many of you, and you thought about not only identifying a post-secondary institution, but you probably looked at institutions, the programs within them, and how they align with your interests at that time. But you thought about their reputation. Why do you want to go to a certain institution? And so students are probed to think about, is the size right for you? Do you like the reputation? Or was it just something that is an institution that so happens to offer one of our FPCTPs in their institution, and you want that school that's been something that has been in your family forever, and so you want that school to be your alma mater as well. So students have to think about that, and we ask our club sponsors to focus on that, showing evidence of how students do that. Okay. And then 6, students will demonstrate that they know how to actually complete post-secondary education applications. We ask that high schools give them different examples, show them what those are. And actually, if any of you are interested, as you look at our post-secondary programs, you can reach out to those program directors and find out what is the application for that particular program. Because as our students enter any of the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs, each one has their own admission process that parallels the institution in which they reside. We know it's important to prepare resumes and think about what is actually on their summary of performance to see how that actually relates to college. And as they're thinking about it, looking at their career applications and college applications to make sure that their resume is fit and aligned with that. And of course, interviewing skills. I think about my niece and her boyfriend just recently had to interview for nursing positions at Florida State, actually. And it was really different. You know, they had to present videos within a specific timeline addressing a couple of questions. I know you're preparing students to do very similar things. And in the time of COVID, it's a very very probable activity that a lot of students may do, similar to what they may have to do with our Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs as well. And then last but not least, we look at the student learning outcome number 7. And looking at student outcome number 7, we think about leadership skills in which align with whatever their career choices are and what they're thinking about. So as they look at the development and in a way that they can apply those skills in related to teamwork, timelines. We know going to post-secondary education, time management is a big issue. Goal setting, thinking about organization, self-advocacy, and how they actually communicate. So I know that our clubs each year, some spend time on 1 or 2 of the learning outcomes, and then others spend time on all of them. So our high schools spend time looking at these learning outcomes, show evidence of what they are at the end of each year, and evidence of how our students get prepared. We have aligned these outcomes in this way, other than research and evidence-based promising practices. But we know that our FPCTPs, our Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs, will look for these same skills. They'll look for these same competencies, preparing our students to be in an inclusive environment. And so we know that if you get them ready in high school to participate, and it will benefit all students in these programs, not just those with intellectual disabilities, but all of them, to choose their right post-secondary institution. So Drew will talk about preparing to enroll in an FPCTP or the next club meeting. Okay.
So here you go. Here's the link for you to be able to find the information. And again, this was shared earlier in the week, but the application opens May 3rd through August 31st, because we want to, so if you can get it to us in May, we'll try to have the money to you before school begins. So you'll have funding at the very beginning of the year. But that application window is from May 3rd to August 31st for you to apply for this resource. It is not a grant. It is a resource. So it's not a difficult application. You just simply have to share how your club will be developed. And these are clubs just like any other club, like Future Business Leaders of America, or whatever the clubs may be at the high school. And that's what we want this club to be, an official club at your high school. And funds can be used for a sponsor to that club, because you've got to have somebody to lead the club. And it can also be, funds can also be used to buy things for the club or for students in the club. So maybe it's t-shirts with the club name on it. Maybe it's money to go on a trip to visit the program at Santa Fe College. And so you're paying for that bus fee for the bus to take you to Santa Fe College or wherever may want to visit. So there's lots of ways that these dollars can be used. And I just wish I would have had an opportunity like this whenever I was teaching in high school, to be able to start a club and be able to have funding to be able to cover these expenses. So as we move on, so when you're preparing to enroll in a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, and a lot of these items that I have listed here are things that could be completed in a club, but these are for other students who maybe aren't part of a club. Here are some things to do with students to help them prepare. Visit our website and learn more about each approved Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. Now, there are 19 programs on 24 campuses. So already there are quite a few options for students, and we're hoping that there will be many, many more. But visit our website, and on the last slide of this presentation is a link to our website, and you'll find it there on Find a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. Connect with vocational rehabilitation counselor to discuss training for employment goals. So finding out how vocational rehabilitation can support students in this process is also very important. They're a key partner in this process. Contact a program director for campus tour and program information. That's certainly something that students um, can do. Or if you're helping a student learn more about programs, you can, all of those contact folks are on the list where the programs are listed. The contact person is also listed there as well. So expand your social network. You know, whenever and these are things for students to think about, but they're also things for transition professionals, whether it be a teacher or a transition specialist, to be thinking about also. Students are going to be interacting with a lot of different students whenever they're in a program. So helping students begin to expand that social network. And that's another way that the college and career transition clubs can help. Think about your personal and career goals. So to really help students think about what are their goals for the future. And we all were pretty well, in many cases, set on what we were going to do whenever we started looking for a college or a university to attend. And so students need to think about what are their personal and career goals. Consider if you want to go to college away from home. Many of our programs have a residential component. And so there are students that have gone from, for instance, from Panama City. A student attended the College of the Florida Keys, which has a residential component. So just like any student would consider, am I going to stay at home and go to school, or am I going to go away from home and go to school? Practicing interview skills, practice time management and organization skills, self-advocacy skills, make sure that your documentation of your disability is close at hand. You know, we've talked to several disability service coordinators, and they said, many students come in, and when you ask about their disability, and whenever you're going into a disability services office, you're self-disclosing. And students need to understand about self-disclosure, and that the difference between between secondary and post-secondary, and whenever the Individuals with Disability Education Act ends for students, whenever they exit the K-12 system and they move on to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and how that covers and provides services for them. But it's very different whenever they move from entitlement to eligibility. And making sure that students are able to share information about their disability. And back to the student services director, they said many students say, well, let me call my mom real quick and she can tell you about my disability. And so think about that with students in the high school, that they need to be able to share information about their disability, about the accommodations that have worked for them so that they can self-advocate. Next is be able to express your support needs. That was pretty much that same one. And then complete application for your school of choice. And students having all of that information that we all know is very valuable, and also that we need to keep very safe and protect, but students understanding what information is going to be required whenever they complete that application, and having that information available whenever they complete that application. Questions to ask students at the very beginning: why do you want to go to college? Which programs offer career options that interest you? What credentials a program offer? That's something important for students to look at, because every program offers different credentials. Are credentials industry certifications? In some cases they are, in other cases they're credentials from that institution of higher education. How long does it take to complete a program? And some programs are 2 years, some programs are 3 years, some programs have an exit at 1 year if the student just wants to attend the first year and not continue for the second and third year. What supports are available to help you succeed? Many programs have a mentor component. So what are the support? These are questions that students ask whenever they're talking to the folks at a post-secondary institution and at a Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition program. Students also need to think about, what supports do I need to succeed? What is a typical class size? And our programs are inclusive. So, you know, students are participating with other students. So it depends on the institution as to how large that class size might be. And then, do you have the skills to live independently? If students want to live independently or live on campus, they need skills in place so that they're ready for that freedom and that independence of being on their own. And finally, what is the cost? And we all know that there are there's a lot of variance in the cost of post-secondary education. There's a lot of difference in the cost in Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. Some of the programs at the career technical colleges are not terribly expensive. A program that might be at Southeastern University, which is a private, not-for-profit university, and also has a residential component, is much more expensive. So choosing which option is going to be best for you. So here's a link to our college showcase and graduate panel. So the showcase was something that we're going to have each January, and this is a link to last year's showcase so that you can see all of the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs and find out information about them. And then the graduate panel was a panel that that was a part of our Florida Post-Secondary Education Program Planning Institute. And we had some awesome students who are in Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs who did a far better job than I can do about telling us about the importance of post-secondary programs. So feel free to click those links and be able to visit those on our website or on our YouTube channel. Something else that's exciting that's coming up is going to be our Family to Family Toolkit, and it's a springboard for students and families to explore post-secondary education options. And we know that there are lots of families out there that need lots of information to understand more about post-secondary opportunities for students with intellectual disabilities and resources. And so there's a link right there that takes you to of a video about the Family to Family Toolkit. So now that we've talked about those things that are prep for post-secondary education, we're going to actually talk about the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs. And this is something I want to make sure that I say very clearly, but students, eligible students, and this is directly from the legislation, must be a student with an intellectual disability as the term is defined, and that's the federal definition, including but not limited to a transitional student. So that means that in the legislation it says including 18 to 26, which we know are our typical transition ages for students that are exiting and moving on. But that's not limited to. So we do have students that are older than 26 participating. Students must physically attend the eligible institution. So although we have done lots of online during the pandemic, the legislation specifically addresses that it is a program where students physically attend. And then students must submit the eligible documentation regarding his or her intellectual disability. And that could include a current individualized plan for employment from vocational rehabilitation. It could be an individualized education plan from the school district. It could be a diagnosis from a physician or a psychologist. And those are the guidelines, and each program has specific requirements of what they ask students to provide to document that they are a person with an intellectual disability. So the eligible institutions that are eligible to develop and have a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program include state universities, Florida college system institutions, career center or technical colleges, as they're now known here in Florida, There's also a charter technical career center, which is eligible. And then finally, an independent college or university that is located and that is chartered in the state, not for profit, accredited by SACS, and is also eligible to participate in FRAG. So there are 120 eligible institutions in the state of Florida. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we had 120 options for students with intellectual disabilities to be able to choose their post-secondary option? So next, Jess is going to share with you some information about all of the FPCTPs. You're mute, Janet. Janice, you're on mute.
As Drew mentioned, there are 19 FPCTPs and on 24 different campuses. So as you see, you'll see the location by some of the institutions that are multiple locations, not just one. And a comment like Drew made earlier about our technical colleges, when we get to taking a look at those, whatever district you're in, for every technical college in that district, each one of them are eligible to become one of the FPCTPs. And that's something that universities and state colleges do not get to take the advantage of. In Florida Atlantic University is one of our programs, has been with us since the beginning, at Jupiter and Boca Raton. University of Central Florida, right here in Orlando. So we are fortunate to have the center at UCF, and we have a program at UCF. Southeastern University currently is our only private, not-for-profit institution that's in Lakeland, and they've been with us for quite a few years as well. Florida International is one of our new ones on board since last year, and they pumping it out and growing in Miami. Florida Gulf Coast University is another new one that just joined our team within a year. They're in Fort Myers. University of South Florida. I know we got a lot of new babies on here. They are with us as well at University of South Florida, housed in St. Pete. They are joining us as well. College of the Florida Keys. As Drew always says, he wished that he would have thought about thinking about college in a different way than maybe he did, and thought about, wow, why wouldn't I go to the Keys for college? Well, and so we have an FPC down there and a lot of opportunities for our students. And they have expanded to not only Key West, but to the Upper Keys. And so they're in 2 locations. Santa Fe College in Gainesville. Indian River has just expanded, and they've been with us a while. Indian River State College, they're now in Fort Pierce and Vero Beach. St. Petersburg College is in St. Pete, so we got a couple of them hanging out in St. Pete. Tallahassee Community College has been with us a while in Tallahassee. Broward College is a new one on board, and with them, they decided we'll have 2 campuses. They're in Fort Lauderdale, Coconut Creek, and Pembroke Pines campuses. So we're excited about them as well. You can hear there's a lot of new ones. Miami-Dade Public Schools, Robert Morgan is a veteran program with us, and they've been hanging around in Miami. McFadder Technical College in Davie. McFadder and Sheridan were together, and Miami-Dade said, hey, you know what? Let's break up because we have more than one technical college in our area. So Sheridan Technical Colleges now is one of our new ones on board in Hollywood. Lee County Public Schools, you see, are in Fort Myers Technical College and Cape Coral Technical College. Orange Technical College, another one here in Central Florida, West Side, in Wintergreen. Lively Technical College, a new one on board in Tallahassee. So you got community state college, a community college, and you have a technical college. Okaloosa Technical College, hanging out in the Panhandle, helping out with Fort Walton Beach. They are new, joining us as well. And so the technical colleges can really grow. Again, our universities and state colleges have one shot, whereas the technical colleges, each one can join us. Now, some of the information that Drew mentioned about our FPCTPs and questions that students should ask is sort of like we ask about programs or degrees, what are offered at institutions. Each one of our institutions, some have one credentials, others have numerous credentials. Trust me, the options are wide open at our FPCTPs for our students. And our students, regardless of where they live, as Drew gave you an example, one living in Panhandle, but went to Key West, they're not limited to their location. But as we look at the credentials, they're very varied. I won't read each and every one to you, because we do have a few slides to show you, but I want you to see the range of things that they have. Workforce readiness certification, 3D animation technology. We have some that are very focused, like our Orange County Technical College West Side, focus on where they knew students will absolutely get jobs. So they designed, they have credentials as a welding helper and as an electrician helper. And, our programs are very focused about what they want to offer, because one of the major outcomes is students become employed competitively. Other credentials, customer service certificate. And I know you probably saw on the previous slide, hospitality. Well, Florida is that kind of state. We're high in tourism, so we have a lot of folks come here. What we've seen at our technical colleges, a lot of them offer various levels of certification completion. Like you see the OCPA, Information and Technology Assistance, or OCPA, Basic Healthcare Worker. They may not have to pursue the entire each benchmark or level for the occupational completion point, but each one of them are credentials that are offered. OCPA Private Security Guard. I like the OCPA NAC refrigeration and heating helper. So I hope you're seeing that they're not just groundskeeping, they're not making flowers, they're not just feeding folks or cleaning. We have institutions and students who are graduating from our programs who are doing STEM related, pursuing STEM related credentials, as well as education and business related credentials that we're extremely proud of as we think about their growth and their options, and not only that, their completion. So the CCT clubs lead right into these. And we're happy to say that when you look at the CCT clubs, with the inclusivity of it, all of our CCT clubs have information to offer for every student, not just for those for intellectual disabilities.
So here we have a picture of students from the Inclusive Education Services program at UCF. And this picture just speaks a book full, really. If you look at the students, look at the smiles on their face and how excited they are to be UCF grads. And then look at the reflection there in the building of all of those family members taking pictures, so proud to see their student, their niece, their grandchild, their child, their friend, their neighbor graduating from a program at a university. So we want to talk to you about opportunities, because everyone can make a difference. So there are still applications for approval as a Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program. So if you know someone at a state college or a university or a technical college, let us know. We are talking with people continually, sharing information. Help us identify that champion. And we all know that every program that has been developed has a champion behind it somewhere, someone that understands the importance of post-secondary education for students with intellectual disabilities. So help us identify who that is. We want a program at all 120 eligible institutions. There's also still the request for proposal for program startup and enhancement grants. Those grants are up to $300,000 annually for the development and implementation and sustainability of programs. And that's separate from student scholarships. And student scholarships are $7,000 a year for students to participate in a program. So, you know, students must be at an approved Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program to receive that scholarship. And then another opportunity is still coming up, those college and career transition clubs. So if you'd like to start a club, we would encourage you to join in and be a part of that so that we can make the dreams a reality, because we are empowering students and families. We're creating and providing choices for post-secondary education, offering a range of opportunities. You saw all of those credentials that Janice went through and shared with you, so that Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs will become the routine and not the exception. And remember, when you're sharing this information with people, we are not a grant. The Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act was legislation that established these programs and the center to coordinate these activities. So this is something that's in legislation. It's not just something that's here for a while and then may not be here, but this is something that's in legislation and will be here for a long time. You know, I oftentimes say that just because this hasn't been doesn't mean that it should not have been, because we've probably all worked with students at the high school level who aged out, and just as they were aging out, age 20, 21, reaching that age of 22, so many things were really coming together for that student, but there was not an opportunity for them. Well, now there is an opportunity. Florida is leading the way in this area. We have, you know, as you saw in the opening presentation that Iris did yesterday, the number of programs that we have compared to other states, we're only second only to one other state with the number of programs. And also we have support from our legislators in Florida like no other state has to see programs expand. So I want to take a little bit of time. I hope we've got some time for a few questions that you might have.
I see a comment in the chat box that said Okaloosa Technical College is in the process of approval. They are an approved program. They became approved this year, so they are officially an approved program, and we're happy for that. So, woohoo!
Other questions, and I can open, if someone please, I can't see the chat while I'm looking at everything else, but if there are any other questions in the chat box.
I don't see any questions.
Just lots of good comments.
Great.
Somebody asked, how do we get the college and VOTEC classes for access programs in the Sumter Lake and Citrus County areas?
So are you, I'm wondering, I see this is W. Daniels, if you're asking about the college and career transition programs, or are you asking about FPCTPs? I'm not certain. How do you get the classes for access programs? Access, help us understand. Because now we think of access, there's a program with access in the Florida Keys. So help us understand your question.
Right, you were going through some of the colleges and technical centers that were offering the programs that you went through for our students with intellectual disabilities. I actually just spoke to some of the VOTEC centers in our area, and they don't offer any programs for those students. That's what I was asking, or are there plans to have any of those programs in our area?
Oh, not that we're aware of, but that's what we would be happy to help you if you can tell us who the folks are there, that because we are sending information to every career technical college director, to the disability service person at that location. So we're sending information to them regularly. But if you know someone there and can help put us in contact with that person that would be interested in seeing those programs developed there, they're eligible. What is the career technical college that's in that area? I just don't know it off the top of my head.
We have Lake Tech College in Lake County, and we have
Okay.
Withlacoochee Technical Center in Citrus.
Both of those are eligible to complete an application to develop a Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Program. At the same time, they can apply for a grant with grant funding up to $300,000 a year to support the development and implementation of that program. And there are $7,000 a year scholarships for every student with intellectual disabilities that participates in that program, that they'll receive that $7,000 a year scholarship to participate. So all we need to do to implement that is find the folks at those institutions that are interested in seeing that start, because we're happy to share examples and have them and as the pandemic hopefully is coming to an end here within a few months, and folks will be able to visit other programs and see how that works at other technical colleges. We're happy to do that. So that's what our work is about, the development of programs. So we'd be happy to help you. Please just reach out to us. And if you have some other names, we're happy to set up a Zoom meeting to be able to share information about the process, just for folks who are interested. They're not committing by having a Zoom with us, but we're happy to just meet with them and share the information.
And we are, like Drew said, are in the process. We're reaching out to lots of leads. We have over 800 contacts that we reach out on a regular basis. And right now we're reaching out to inform everyone in the state that we are having a May and June, our Progress, a mid-year institute in June. And so that's the 16th through the 18th. And people are welcome, institutions are welcome to come in a team, because it is teams that we acknowledge, are welcome to come into teams and learn about. If there's a person at a high school, there's individuals at a college of any kind, or VR person, and they want to help develop programs in areas across the state, we welcome to have them join. We have a strategic planning process that we go through with them that we'll be happy to welcome them aboard. There's a question in the chat room about HBCUs participating. We do not have one yet, and we've been working very closely with Bethune University. And we also had worked closely with FAMU and Chinscut. And so we have reached out to everybody. Not one institution that's eligible does not receive our invitation to come. And so we continue to work with each one of them to do that.
All of those historic HBCUs are eligible to create Memorial. I know is another one in Miami. They're all eligible to develop a program.
Thank you so much. I am going to let them continue if we have a couple more questions, but just to remind our participants, because I know that we need to wrap up so we can get to our next session. We thank our presenters, Drew and Janice, so much for presenting today. Lots of great positive feedback in that chat. And I just want to ask the participants one more time to go back to that session. Just scroll down to the bottom where you found this Zoom link and make sure you take the evaluation so we can get some feedback on this session. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.